Talk about getting viciously screwed over by someone that you gave everything for. That's something that happened to me when I moved to the Philippines to start what I was hoping was going to be the part of my life, when I could finally take a step back, relax, and enjoy myself once and for all. Life for me had been hard. It had been a long and drawn out slog, rarely happy, rarely comfortable in my own skin, and mostly a feeling of disillusionment as to why my life didn't go the way I hoped it would. I saw all my friends around me succeeding, to some degree anyway. And while I didn't fail at life, I never had any time to myself. If I wasn't working, I was tired from working, therefore I couldn't often take part in the things I wanted to take part in. I know so many people have to go through this in today's world, and I couldn't wait to get to the point in time when I had enough money to just stop, and not necessarily stop, but start again and start afresh. Do something that I'd always wanted to do. I was someone who lived and breathed the Philippines in the early 1990s. I mean, as much as I could. I went for 2 weeks in the early 90s and fell in love with the country. And although I didn't have a chance to go back for a very long time after that, it stayed with me throughout nearly every single day of my life. If you think about that for a second, I found the place that I was happiest. I found the country where I was happiest, and I got those feelings based on being there for such a short amount of time. Life gets in the way, marriage, kids, divorce, money loss, and 10 years go by until I finally got back to the Philippines again. That was just after I was divorced. 2 kids, 6 and 5, that my wife had decided to take away from me, and I couldn't do anything about it. Child support payments, which I would have gladly paid if it meant that my ex-wife didn't have any benefit from the money whatsoever, but she did. And it was awful to hand over a big portion of my earnings while she didn't work. My kids would have been better off with me, but she filled them with poison and I hardly saw them. I thought I gave up my dreams of the Philippines for my wife. That's all I thought about. Yet I was doing the normal life path that people were meant to go down, but all I was thinking about was the Philippines. That marriage and divorce ruined me, and 10 years later, in the early 2000s again, for only 2 weeks, I was back. I had the best time ever, and I started to dream about when I would finally be able to move permanently to the Philippines and start living somewhere where I actually wanted to live. I didn't dare get into another relationship at home after what had happened with the first one. The thought of just losing all my money for a second time scared me, because it's not like I enjoyed going to work. It was 13 more years until I got the chance to go to the Philippines again, and this was in 2014. My kids had finally gone their own way, and when they got older, they did come around and understand that their mother had been very bad by what she did. And I had managed to develop closer ties to my kids, which I'm very fortunate for. There's nothing like a vindictive woman who doesn't provide anything, thinking she's entitled to everything. That's what I had to deal with, but that's beside the point now because I am in a better place. But in 2014, most of my money had been spent in child support over the years, but I had managed to save up what I thought would be enough money to retire, about $300,000. And I was going into 2014 to see if I still felt the same way as I did the first 2 times I went. I did, and because of that, I returned home for a few months, got all my affairs in order, told my kids I was leaving, saying I hoped they would come to visit, and then I moved permanently to the Philippines at the age of 54, finally retired, finally free, and finally with a chance to start living the life that I'd always wanted to live. Having only visited the Philippines 3 times in total before I moved there, I hadn't really picked out my favourite part of the country. I'd only been to Manila and Angeles City. Those were the only 2 places I'd been to, so I did want to also go and look at Cebu because I'd read about it a lot and I wanted to go and find out for myself what it was like there. I liked it, but I felt more of an affinity to Manila, although I didn't really want to live there. I tried Bohol as well, which was a nice island, but again, for me it was a bit too laid back. So I put my plan in action to move to Angeles City, which was the city that I felt most comfortable in. The only thing that would have made Angeles City better for me would have been if it was next to a beautiful beach. I mean, there is that place not too far away in the distance in Subic Bay, but it takes a while to get there. It's not the most beautiful part of the Philippines, but it's there if you want to make the journey. But mainly, the reason I chose Angeles City is because I thought it fit in perfectly with what it was like, I mean myself that is, where other guys who had been through difficult times at home and had bad relationships had their lives ruined, and now they found themselves in a place where they could be more than what they were at home. I'm not going to pretend that I didn't love everything that went on in Angeles City, because I did. I loved it so much. But I wasn't really attracted to the idea of meeting a girl in a bar and having a relationship with her, because it just seemed to be a bad idea. But what I did do after I moved there was find a place to live, set my budget, try to find activities that I could do to keep myself occupied in retirement, and also I tried to meet more people in the expat community who had moved there just like I had. For the most part, during my first month there, life was great. And it was the first time I felt excited in such a long time, because I'm thinking to myself that this is going to be my life now forever. I was planning to spend about $1,000 a month. Basically, I had 300 months to do that, which was a long time, and after my first month, I found out that it was a little bit more difficult than I expected to stick to that $1,000 a month budget, especially when you want to go out for a meal or go to the bars, but it's doable. I did decide that it would be worthwhile increasing my budget to $1,500 a month. It wouldn't last me as long, but as a guy who had always drunk and smoked heavily and was pretty sedentary in terms of a sheer lack of exercise, I was kind of banking on the fact that I probably wouldn't make 75. That was why I comfortably increased my budget when I was living on that, and it made things better. I took my time in the Philippines just to get used to it. I had to mess around with visas and everything like that until I could get something better arranged. But I felt like I found my place and my rhythm and my budget, and while I couldn't go mad every single day, I could do what I wanted to do, maybe 2 days a week, sacrifice another 2 days just to have a reasonable time, and then 3 days just taking it really, really easy. It was working for me, and I found that it was the best thing for me to do. I made quite a close friendship with one other expat that I met. He was from the States, just like me, 5 years older, and living on a similar budget to what I was living on. He'd been through the same turmoil back at home in terms of a failed marriage and having to spend most of his money to make sure his ex-wife didn't need to work. So it felt like we were kind of in it together, and we built this friendship over the next 3 months, and we would frequent the bars together once or twice a week. He was one of the guys that really loved the bars. I saw him have lots of different girlfriends until one day, after I'd been there for 6 months, 3 months building this friendship with him, he meets a girl, decides to move to her province with her, and we didn't keep in touch anymore. I persevered with my life, made another friend, and he went and did something else. And that's when you realize that things in the Philippines are a bit different to how they are at home. You can make a friendship, and it's very transient though in its nature, because people move on and people change and go to different places. So I think that's why when I was just walking down Walking Street one day, and a girl came over and kind of linked arms with me and asked me where I was going, I was actually just going to grab a burger. She said, "Can I come with you?" I just thought, why not? I felt like I'd just lost a good friend who had left, and this other guy had left, and yeah, I needed someone to talk to. I needed some company. So I just went with it and wondered if she wanted to eat a burger as well. She was talking about all the usual things that a girl is going to talk about on Walking Street at around 6 in the evening, but I was just saying I don't want to talk about that kind of stuff. I just wanted to go and get a burger, but yeah, come with me if you want. Let's have something to eat together. After I had my burger, she convinced me to go and have a drink with her somewhere else. She didn't work in one of the bars, she just kind of worked freelance, and it was, I think, a sense of company that I felt when I met her that made me think it was a good idea to have her go with me to get this burger and some drinks. Then the drinks start flowing, and this was my night out, and I was going for a few drinks anyway, so buying a few extra for her wasn't going to cause me much of a budget problem. I found out, after we started drinking that I liked her, and all of a sudden it was like we were old friends, joking around, and it did feel good to have someone to talk to. Someone who I felt in a way wasn't transient because she was from the Philippines. Therefore, the chance of her building a friendship or relationship or whatever, whatever I was thinking at the time, it wasn't like it was going to collapse or go wrong in the sense that all of a sudden she's gone to do something else and I had to start again. I think that's why I felt good at the time. I mean, I'm trying to explain it away because if I didn't try to explain it away, I wouldn't really understand what had happened. But after drinks, I didn't say, "Would you like to go to my place?" She didn't ask, she just went with me, and I didn't stop it. And that was how I got into a relationship with the freelance girl that worked on the streets of Angeles City. It didn't seem like that's what she was in the sense you would expect. It just felt like we'd met and liked each other and things happened quickly. 3 months later, she's living with me permanently. I've had to increase my monthly budget to $2,000 and I'm going with it because although at that rate my money would have gone in around another 11 years, 11 years felt like a very long time anyway, and I just thought that something would happen by then where I'd maybe start making some more money. I was thinking about looking online for work, and this was back when not many people did it, so it wasn't as easy as it is today, at least from what I understood. But I thought it was a possibility, and it was that possibility that I focused on, even though I wasn't doing much about it. But I didn't feel like I was by myself anymore, and I didn't feel bored anymore, didn't feel jaded or upset, so I had someone with me, and it made me, have a better time of things when I was with her. It was great to feel so wanted and so special to someone, and that's why things started out the way they did, I figure. The point in time where I could have maybe changed my mind, told myself that my money's going down too quickly, it's going to run out quickly this way. But I think that's the reason that you continue with things anyway and try to work around the issues, which perhaps means that it's going to cause more issues for you instead. But you don't think it will, do you? You think it's going to cause less, but I will get to that. She was from the island of Leyte. Lots of girls that I met in Angeles City seemed to come from there. She was 26 years old, and I thought that was about right in terms of a foreigner-Philippines relationship age difference. It was all about what I was bringing to the table, and what I was bringing was finances, and she was bringing youth. Kind of like a combination of both of us, and I thought that's how things worked out the best there. I'd seen guys who were a lot older than me that seemed to have successful relationships with girls in their 20s who stayed with them until the day they died. Perhaps they just had so much money that there was no incentive for their partner to leave them because of the money. But I didn't really think it was just about money at the time, even though I knew money played a big part in things. I thought that there was still the understanding that there's love there, there's respect, and there's that mutual understanding of each other. So perhaps while I was right in the sense that money played a big part, perhaps I didn't realize that it was as important as it was. Probably 99% of everything is the money, and I'd placed it somewhere closer to 50%. That was me thinking I was a realist and someone who knew what they were doing and what they were talking about, but I guess I didn't. I stayed with her for a long time. I don't know if it was 6 months or even longer, and I'd never felt as free in a way as I felt when I was with her. I decided I wanted to get married to her. That should also mean I would get a better visa to stay in the Philippines, and that made me feel more comfortable. When I asked her how she would feel about this, and she said she wanted to get married. She'd be happy. She'd love to be able to get married to me. With that, we went together to Leyte. I'd never been to that island before, and it wasn't the most beautiful island in terms of the city or the infrastructure, but in terms of natural beauty and the beaches and the village close to the beach where she was from, it was so scenic that it made you think, why would anybody leave a place like this? When we were there, I met her family. They were good people, 4 siblings, 3 of whom were still living there, and her parents were only slightly younger than I was, so it didn't feel too strange. The thing that really intrigued me about that place, though, was very close by to where she was from. Somebody from Australia had moved about 5 years ago, and he had a girlfriend there that he married. He'd built a house, and I actually went to visit him, and he seemed to be living the best life that anybody could dream of. His house was quite big. He had a big yard, a pool, and he went to the top floor of his house. He could actually see the sea. I felt like I made a friendship with him when I was there because we kind of had something in common in terms of we both, or I was about to be, married to someone from that place. And he went on to say how he met her in Manila and came here to marry her and loved it and never wanted to move anywhere else again. I really understood why that seemed to be the case. He talked about his budget and how he lived and really just how fantastic it was there. Anytime they want to go somewhere, they go away, but most of the time, just happy to be there. His wife's kids were also living with them, but he seemed to have a really relaxed attitude to everything. And I looked up to him a bit and started to get a bit of inspiration, thinking that this guy seems to have all the answers that I've been looking for. The thing was, when he told me about how much it cost to build, including the land, and how much he was living on, it seemed to be that he was in a very similar financial position to me before he started building. And now he was just living on a lot less money than it would have been if he was living in Manila, for example. And while he talked about the fact that he couldn't do what he wanted when he wanted, he had more than enough money, he said, to be able to just exist in paradise, which were the words he used himself. And I think he started to put ideas into my head that perhaps I wanted to do something similar. I hadn't yet spoken about it, though, to my soon-to-be wife. After visiting her family, we returned to Angeles City, we got married, and we started living a normal married life. That was at the place I'd rented since I moved there. But the problem was, now, living in a small condo unit, it didn't seem that attractive anymore compared to the guy from Australia who was living in my wife's village. He seemed to have the best of everything. He had his wife, but instead of living in a shoebox, he was living in a big house. He had his pool, he had everything, and he had an old car as well. If he needed to go into town to buy any supplies, he could. And what he said was quite a remote location, and he accepts that. But it's not like he couldn't buy something if he wanted to. It just took a bit of time to get there. While I thought that this could be something to do, something great, I didn't think about it too much. It was like, maybe I could do something like this. One thing he did say was if he wanted to go and buy a lot of things, he'd do so every month, sometimes every 6 weeks. He'd buy lots of things and potentially have everything stocked up. And one time, he had a freezer full of what he said was expensive things. Most of the things went bad by the time the power came back. But he said usually the power came back quick enough where this wouldn't be a problem. I think we'd been back in Angeles City for 3 or 4 months, and I was getting a bit restless, thinking about going and doing the same thing as that Australian guy did. When my wife actually mentioned the possibility of doing it, the fact that I'd been thinking about it and not spoken to her about it, it's like that made the decision too easy for me. Because as soon as she said that, I was like, well, I've been thinking the same thing, yeah, let's go and have a look. Let's see how much it's going to cost for us to get some land, build a house, buy a car, and also how much I'll have left over, and then we can work out what the budget would be from there. It was a very quick decision, probably too quick, because I'd been thinking about it for such a long time, like I said, and I think if I hadn't been thinking about it, I would have just jumped all over the idea, but taken a step back and thought about it with a bit more of a clear head. It didn't work like that for me, though, and just like that, we gave up the condo, packed everything up, didn't have many things because I didn't take many things with me to the Philippines, and we headed to Leyte to begin the hunt for something completely new. I was thinking here at this moment, if I spent for everything $100,000, I'd have just under $200,000 left. And from what that Australian guy said, he spends only $600 to $700 a month, and most of that on his monthly bills. And then, if he had a bit left over, he might go out for a few beers at some of the local places, which were extremely cheap. It wasn't like I was going to need to spend a lot of money by going there. And if you spend this money now, you're going to be saving this later. So when I was working everything out, it didn't seem like it was a bad idea. It didn't seem like I was doing anything stupid. It was like it was going to actually improve my retirement, while at the same time being with my wife, who I feel is a person that I've loved so much. I didn't know anything else. It just seemed like a great idea. The first thing I did when we returned was go and see that Australian guy. Told him I was following his footsteps and I can't wait. He seemed to be quite happy about it, to have a friend close by, and I was also happy by the idea of having a friend as well. Then we spent a number of weeks looking for the perfect plot. We were living in very rudimentary accommodation in the meantime. Basically, it was a shack on the family's land. And when I say shack, I mean shack in its most basic form. So going without air conditioning for a while, without a proper bathroom facility for a while, it was difficult, but also an eye-opening experience, which I'm glad I went through, so it would make me even more grateful when things were ready. We did find our plot, $15,000. It was only small, couldn't see the sea, but that didn't matter, so I paid for that, and before long, construction started, and I agreed to spend $85,000 and $10,000 on a car. When the house was being constructed, it was going to be 6 months, and we didn't really want to live in a shack for 6 months. So I actually decided that once we'd been there for a few weeks, saw things were going okay, and we left back up to Angeles City just to spend some time there waiting for the house to be ready. We went back 2 months later to see the progress, and it's coming along well. We left it in the capable hands of her family, and things are going great. I met up with my friend again, spent a few days in that shack, and then returned to Angeles City, where we planned to come back again in another 2 months, and then one more time when it was ready. The second time we came back, this was 4 months after the construction started. I went to go and see my friend from Australia, knocked on the door, and his wife answered. "Where is he?" "We're not together anymore. He's gone back to Australia." "What? What do you mean? I saw him 2 months ago and everything was great. What's happened?" And then his wife said he'd run out of money and they'd fallen out. And while she was saying that, I just looked over her shoulder behind her and saw a guy there, a Filipino guy around her age, and I looked at her and said, "Who's this?" She said, "It's my boyfriend, because my husband just left and I can't do anything." I left the house and went back to speak to my wife and said what had happened, and she said, "Yeah, it happens quite a lot." I was already 4 months into the build. One of the reasons for doing it was to have a friend close by, and all of a sudden, I found that he's gone and no money left. He's gone back home. And his wife has got a boyfriend living with her in the house. Was this trying to give me a forewarning as to what was to come? When I spoke to my wife again, it turned out that this guy, that Filipino guy, was the father of her kids, who was living in the house that he built for her. And that's when you really feel like you've been smacked in the face, because I felt very different about that place now, because I'd found this out. Yet we were 4 months into the construction and we had to continue. And my wife just said, "Don't worry, I will never do that. Some people do, some people don't, but I will never do it. Don't worry." So I had to not worry because there was nothing else I could do. We did, however, return to Angeles City for another 2 months. When the house was built and ready, we moved down there and I set my budget at $600 and hoped for the best. I was still quite shocked about the fact that my friend, the Australian, had gone and he hadn't even come back. I didn't have his contact information either, so I couldn't even see if he was good, and I never saw him again. Living in the house to start with, it was quite fun, but I was very wary about what had happened with my friend because it seemed to be such a shocking thing. One day he's great, living his best life in his house with his amazing wife, and then 2 months later he's gone, run out of money, and his wife's living in his house. I mean her house technically, but the one he paid for, with her boyfriend, which happened to be the father of her kids. It was a very unnerving situation. Things are okay, for the first few months though. But one thing I'm finding is I'm spending so much more money than I should be. And again, I'm not sure if this is the same sort of thing that happened to my friend. I talked together with my wife on a number of occasions what the budget would be when we got there, and she fully agreed that we set it at $600 a month. That's how much we've got to live on. Yet even though she agreed to that and took it on board, she didn't seem to understand that when she asked for a certain amount of money for something, maybe $300, and this is not an item that is essential, that this isn't able to come out of the actual budget. This is on top of that, which means that we're going to be able to survive properly if we continue to do this. I mean, we're not going to, are we? It's difficult. She doesn't understand that if she wants something for someone in her family and it's $100, and then she says, "Well, we're only spending $600 a month," not knowing these extra items on top are actual money things. Therefore, we're not spending $600 a month. I don't know if she did it on purpose, and I don't know if it was because I was just so concerned after seeing what happened to my friend. But I felt like I was on edge all the time. But I'd say after we spent a year there, we hadn't spent on average $600 a month. We'd spent, including everything that I was giving to my wife, probably $2,000 a month. And most of that, more than half of that, went to my wife just because she asked for it. And I felt like I had no choice because of the house thing. I'm not sure if it was seeing her behave so differently to how she behaved when we were in Angeles City. I'm not sure what it was, but it was like once we had this house, and perhaps once I'd seen my friend have the problems and had to leave, it was like I just thought she was out to get me, and perhaps she wasn't. But perhaps I made it that way. Or it could be both, I don't know. But after I told her we've spent way too much money this year, And I mean, she's still being my wife and everything's okay, in terms of the relationship. But I said, we really need to cut back on spending, otherwise we're going to run out of money. We really need to cut back, and are you prepared to do that? And she said, well, how about we open a business and then we can make more money, then we don't need to cut back, and we can live a great life. Now, if I had heard other stories about guys trying to do businesses with their wives, if I'd have heard these before, I would never have done what I did. So I think that's why a story such as mine is so valuable for people to listen to, so you know what not to do. But when she said that, instead of me thinking, hang on, this is going to cost $100,000 to do this small guest house, which is what she came up with, instead of thinking I could be losing all that money and then being in an even worse situation, I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe we can spend $2,000 a month then, and we're going to be in a better position. If only I'd spent time listening to stories and knowing what happened, I wouldn't have done it, but I did. We bought a plot of land and built a very small, rudimentary guest house with 10 rooms. It was only cheap construction, but cheap to rent out, and to start with, people were staying in them, and it wasn't doing too badly. It actually cost me $120,000, so what I had left wasn't very much money. And I think we'd made the right decision, though I really thought we'd made the right decision, until it became clear that I hadn't even come close to making the right decision. 3 months go by after it had been completed, and it was bringing in about $800 a month, so not quite $2,000 yet. But it wasn't too bad really, and then something breaks. We had to have a generator there, and it broke, so I needed to spend extra money to replace that, and then my wife says she doesn't want to work there anymore. We need to have someone else go there and be there all the time, and that's going to cost money, so I'm having to pay for that. And it was a very sudden thing in how things go wrong, because when I got down to about $40,000, I'm not telling my wife exactly how much money I have left because I don't think that's the best thing to say. She would go to the guest house, check on things, make sure that the person working there was doing it properly, and I usually just stayed at home and was happy at home. It was great, but I felt a bit uncomfortable. One day I decided to go to the guest house just to see how things were going because I hadn't been for at least 2 months. This receptionist that she hired, it was a guy, and well, is there any point me saying exactly what this was? That was her long-term boyfriend. I was paying my wife's long-term boyfriend to be the receptionist at the guest house that I built for my wife. And that is when you understand that what I saw happening with my friend wasn't an outlier kind of incident. It was commonplace. It was likely. That was more likely than not going to happen to anyone who finds himself in a position like this. The thing is, when I saw her, she just acted like it was nothing, like I thought you knew. And the thing that I didn't understand the most was the fact that this long-term boyfriend of hers was absolutely fine with her working the streets of Angeles City and being married to someone. But I mean, what was I to think in that moment? It was a really difficult thing to come to terms with, because even if I could say to my wife, never do that again, I would still think she would. And she would anyway, even if she said she wouldn't. So I knew there and then that I made the biggest mistake I'd ever made, and I wish my friend had somehow given me a warning. I didn't have any warnings to the fact. He just wasn't there after everything seemed good, and his wife's boyfriend moved into the house. And now, after spending most of my money, I had, like I said, just under $50,000 left. Spending most of that, it was a time when I knew the relationship ended. I couldn't get divorced in the Philippines because you can't, so I was thinking about getting the marriage annulled. I just had to leave. I had to just kiss goodbye to all that money. I was completely dejected by the fact that I'd fallen for her tricks. Social Security, that was a long way for me, a long way away. I didn't have any other source of income. The money I had was not enough to live on anymore, and with that I had to go back home. Had to try to wake up from the nightmare that I was living in, because it just didn't seem real how quickly things went as bad as they did. When I was with my wife every day, there wasn't any indication that she was spending time with her boyfriend at the guest house. It was like somehow she managed to get me to build that for her, because I was thinking that I was using that money that I had to make more for both of us, as opposed to giving it to her. Many guys have fallen for this trap, and I was just one of them. I wish I'd heard stories. I really wish I had, but I hadn't. I didn't. I had to come to terms with the fact that I'd waited my whole life, nearly my whole life, to be able to move to the Philippines. When I was there, I ruined it because I put my faith and trust into someone who was a lot younger than me and who basically took my life's work. That's all I can say about it, and it's the biggest regret ever. I still love the Philippines. I'm thankful to say that I moved there again, and I'm living there now as of 2023. Social security is enough for me to live on, and I do have a few other bits of savings. But as much as I would love to be in a relationship with someone, it's not going to happen. I mean, it could happen, but I would find myself getting too emotionally attached, so I stay alone and I will remain alone. I just hope that this version of retirement will go better than the first one, because it's my last chance.